Yesterday's program talking about tariffs, and Emily De La Bruyere saying, hey, I want 900% tariffs on China. And look, I'm not entirely opposed to it. So a lot of folks sending me this Mark Cuban tweet, I'm assuming trying to call me a hypocrite, but Cuban tweeted out, I don't care who you are. If you are complaining we need tariffs to bring manufacturing and jobs to the U.S., and you don't buy American exclusively, you are a hypocrite in all capital letters. You want to bring manufacturing back, lead by example, and get friends and family to do the same. Clearly, Mark Cuban hasn't been to a Home Depot lately because there are nothing on the shelves to buy. So come on, Mark, get on board. But here to share some thoughts on this idea of, hey, if we had the option, would we buy? I've asked my good friend Lori Wallach to come share some thoughts. She's the director of Rethink Trade. You can check out their website at rethinktrade.org. Lori, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for inviting me back.
So what do you make of this Cuban statement? I mean, this is one of those things that you're going to throw out there to try and make people like you, me, who support the use of tariffs, maybe not the way this guy's doing it, but support it. What do you make of this comment?
It's really hypocritical because he was the guy running around the campaign basically bashing tariffs and calling every tariff of any stripe a sales tax and a horrible thing. So, after sort of contributing to, a certain amount of damage to the future of American-made goods, he then, is now clearly unaware that having lost 90,000 factories since NAFTA, China entered the WTO, etc., we don't make a lot of anything here anymore, and we actually do need policies to be able to do it. So either saying, oh, you just have to buy American, whether it's available, or saying, like, there's some magic wand, it might be a one-off tariff. None of those things bring back the manufacturing, bring back the jobs, bring back our ability to make stuff. But we sure as hell need to do that very thing. And there are ways to do it. We are not stuck in the screwed position that we're in, but we're not helped by those kind of one-off comments.
No, and for me, look, I would love to have that choice. In fact, I was told we were going to have that choice. There would be a competition and the market would decide. And look, when the Chinese Communist government is subsidizing U.S. companies to move over there, or just flat out buying up U.S. companies and boxing up the factories and sending them over there, the competition really didn't happen. And we as consumers don't have the option in most cases of buying an American-made product. And I look at a company like Amazon. Amazon could be really helpful by putting on there where this stuff is sourced, where you could click on, hey, I want to buy American-made products. They have the technology to do it. They just won't do it because it's not there as much.
And it's more profitable for them to buy stuff made with Uyghur forced labor and hope that the customs department doesn't realize that's banned and can't come into the country and sell it for a big markup. I mean, the reality is that at this point, there are 17 countries around the world that have chronic, very large trade surpluses. That means they sell a lot more stuff to other countries than they import from the other countries. And they get that way because they use a bunch of what are sometimes called beggar thy neighbor. So just taking care of yourself, screwing the neighbor kind of policies. And some of it is certainly subsidies, but they do stuff like suppress wages. So the Chinas, the Vietnams, authoritarian governments just say this is what you're getting paid. Other countries, bust independent unions, or they suppress consumption. The German tax system, wages are higher than here, but the tax system is such that people have a lower standard of living as far as the things that they buy. They're basically subsidizing their manufacturing and export powerhouse on the backs of their working class consumers, or currency manipulation, or all of the above put together. And you end up with these, a lot of people call them mercantilist countries, sticking their goods way more than the world needs into every other market, flattening even the most productive, strategic, genius product because the price is so artificially low, you can't possibly compete. It just squashes everyone.
Right.
Then you have the United States with the biggest trade deficit in the history of the world. A trade deficit that started in 1975 has gotten bigger and bigger. But at this point, there's 66 other countries that have chronic trade deficits. And I'm talking with the world. You know, President Trump's obsessed with these bilateral trade deficits. There are two of those that matter. Vietnam and Mexico, they matter because they're ginormous. But generally, the thing that matters is the balance with the world. And there are now 66 countries that are in the same different dimension of it, but heading in the same direction we are. You get deindustrialized. That's like a prediction of economic theory. Big, long trade deficit, you get deindustrialized. Your factories go away. We've lost 90,000 of them, and you have more income inequality. So here's like something that'll blow most people's minds. The BRICS, which is the initials of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's like the formation of the biggest middle-income countries, the big powerhouses. All of the BRICS, except for the C, China, now have global trade deficits. And every single one of those other countries has tariffs up against China too, just like us. And so when you see that kind of imbalance, you both see we've got a huge honking mess, but you kind of can see a path to how you could fix it, getting everyone together against the cheaters.
Which I'm all in favor of, but we have a guy who doesn't seem to be getting that. And these across the board tariffs on people who we should be reaching out to. And do you think, because I saw a story today that said, you know, in the administration saying there are big deals that are coming. You know, some countries they're gonna be okay, and we're gonna do these big deals. Do you think that's part of this? Do you think this is the deal making that eventually we're going to all wake up to the reality, what I think we already know, and that it's China? China's the one that we have to, you know, globally come around to pulling back into line. Or is this just, you know, the kind of slapdashery that I expect from this administration?
You know, it's been kind of a heartbreaking spectacle, actually, because the use of tariffs by this administration this time around has been so incoherent and so unprofessional. And tariffs are part of the solution. There are going to have to be tariffs to stop the flood of imports from these countries that cheat. China's by far the worst, but they're not alone. I mean, honestly, Germany has a huge chronic surplus, and they're squashing the rest of Europe. But also, the whole world has trade deficits with Germany. It's also Korea, and it's Japan, and it's Taiwan. I mean, these are sizable, not just with the US, with the whole world. So if we had a system of using the tariffs smartly to deal with, on the defense, the kind of imports you just can't possibly compete with, and you added to that the whole rest of the set of packages, policy package, you need to actually get in the space you create with the tariffs, the investment in more factories, the demand to make it worth investing in the factories for domestic goods. And you do that by things like the stuff Biden did. You do a tax credit. That's better and bigger if you get made in America EV car, or made in America solar panel, or made in America heat pump. And you get a tax credit for as an investor for X number of years if you invest in a new factory. And you get an even better deal if it's a union upfront deal with, like, before you even start. And you get an even better deal if you agree to do X, Y, and Z percentage of American made inputs. And you create all these incentives you have the procurement system. So you have Stronger by America. And you create government demand for the American made goods. And you put all of that together, you figure out the things you really need to bring home. Because obviously we're not going to make everything. You want to make the stuff you need for national security, for national resilience. Like, we all lived through COVID. Like, as someone, you know, who has some sense growing up in Wausau, Wisconsin, what people used to make across the Midwest, I have a sense of, like, of course we can't get blah, blah during COVID because we don't make it anymore because I saw that factory close. But a lot of people on the coasts, they're like, wait, what do you mean we can't get blah, blah? I always find blah, blah at the store. And for them, it was like a come to Jesus moment where they're like, holy beans, we don't make anything anymore. And oh my goodness, we don't really have very diverse sources of imports. So it's all coming from one or two places: medicine, communications equipment, computers, transportation equipment, energy equipment. And all of a sudden everyone realized, like, well, that's a bad idea. We need some redundancy. We need some resilience. And so in the face of all of that, you have the whole country ready to go a different way. And then you've just had a total tariff malpractice of hitting allies, hitting basically countries that aren't really the problem, not phasing it in. So yeah, China needs great big honking tariffs eventually, but until you have in companies that are now hooked on the supply chain of those Chinese goods, unless you know either you're a year and a half down the road and a US company is now making that thing that goes into the thing that you're going to manufacture, or someplace in Europe or in Latin America or some the hell other place that's not got the huge honking tariffs. But if you go from 0 to 60 on China and all of a sudden you don't have a supply chain for manufacturing, that undermines your efforts to be more sustainable in our own manufacturing. So this just it has not been a well thought out plan, to put it mildly. And so we've seen all these downsides we didn't have to have. All the hell in the stock market, everyone having watching their union pensions go into the tank. I mean, that was not necessary if this had been done in a less chaotic way.
I remember years ago when I was in college, there was a discussion about the trade deficits and how, you could have leveled it out, and how back during the Bretton Woods Accord back in, I think, 44, that happened, where they were figuring out how to divvy up the world. And there was an idea floated at the time of having a universal currency, not the dollar, but that countries that had surpluses would pay an enormous tax, and they would redistribute that to countries who were who had the deficits, and there would be a leveling kind of through this basket of currencies. It looks like the dollar is maybe in trouble of being the global currency, and I know some people think it's a good idea to have it. Some people are on the other side, but as the BRIC countries are trying to develop their own, do you see that in any way of being a leveler, or any thoughts?
Yep. So, for folks to sort of know what Professor Rick is saying, basically, there's always one currency in the world, typically one, sometimes a few, that are considered the clearing currency. And that is basically what trade's conducted in. Most of trade's conducted in dollars, or gets converted to dollars. And so the dollar isn't just our currency, it's this currency that other countries hold on to as the reserve. So, for your country to be economically secure, you want reserves of a certain amount of hard currency, the dollar. And sometimes it's treasury bills, sometimes it's cash. But the result of that means that we're not just normally having a currency that floats. Like if you have a huge honking trade deficit, the value of your currency declines. That clears the market. Even with all those mercantile activities of the cheating countries, your currency would go down. The dollar never goes down. The dollar's way overvalued. And what that means is it's much cheaper for folks to send their goods here, because when you take our high dollar to their low currency, it makes it a bargain to have their stuff come into our market. It makes it too expensive for us to export. Our dollar makes stuff much more expensive. And the reason why it stays high instead of actually settling the way the market would normally do if we had this huge deficit is because all these other countries can control the value of the dollar. Some who do it intentionally. China holds 4 or 5 times as much reserve as it needs actually for its what's called balance of payments, to make sure its economy can clear. They're doing that to keep the value of the dollar up for basically manipulation purposes. Other countries hold, a lot of reserve because they have to have X amount of balance of payment security. So we have this problem that Rick just described, where if the whole world weren't using our dollars, we would be less likely to have as big of a trade deficit. And one of the ways to fix that is actually an idea that Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, and interestingly, Senator Hawley, very conservative Republican from Missouri, put into Congress in the previous Congress. And it would basically have a surcharge on foreign investment coming back in. So like when we sell $1 bazillion of stuff, now the Chinese or whomever we've bought the stuff from have the dollars. And then they want to reinvest it back into the stock market, into luxury real estate, into whatever. That's the that's the practical way of the technical saying of the return comes to capital, not to wages. And so they're not paying higher wages or building factories. They're putting their money into some, basically financial investment. So if we made it less appealing to come and have that financial investment by, for instance, putting a surcharge on foreign investment coming in for that kind of investment, not like investment in factory, but stock market, luxury real estate, etc. That could be a very interesting way to actually help bring down the value of the dollar in a way that doesn't crash the dollar.
Right. So what I'm trying to get to is, look, you and I have had conversations before. I said from the very beginning, I think Trump is going to booger up the idea of using tariffs for the future. He's going to bungle this so badly that no one's going to. It's going to be toxic to even bring up the word. Even though right now the word tariff still is fairly popular among, especially my Midwestern working class folks. But I fear he's going to do this so badly we never use this tool again. And I'm trying to figure out how Democrats pick this up and go, hey. We've got a vision, we've got a way, or even Republicans, somebody who's sane, get me someone rational to use this tool in the right way instead of as a bludgeon. Because look, I think this trade war, I don't think anybody really wins with the way Trump is leveling this. I could be wrong, and I hope I am, but I just don't see it that way.
I think there's a risk there. I think there's a risk there that the way he's bungled this is going to give tariff a bad name, even though it's just a neutral tool. And you can use it like a genius, or you can use it like a fool. And he is not doing it in a very thoughtful or coordinated way, is the politic way I would put it. It is, it is really horrible to watch every single day. They're changing something. They're realizing they dropped some ball. And, when you mention all these deals they're making, it scares the hell out of me that they're making deals behind closed doors. For whom? In whose interest? Exactly. I mean, the thing, Rick, that scares me is we could have the worst of all worlds. We could have a deal where we got, excuse my language, but the show in the markets that was not necessary. And then it brings down the markets. Then you have a situation where we maybe don't get any investment or any return on manufacturing because it's so unsteady, it's so unpredictable that, as you said, what investor decides to take the risk that the tariffs are going to be there the next day and actually invest in a new factory here, relying on something that who the hell knows? And then, if all of that weren't bad enough, they could be making special interest deals where, they're like, let's kill some privacy and antitrust laws to help the big tech be even more rotten around the world. And, let's make the Europeans eat a bunch of unhealthy food that they don't want to eat. And, oh yeah, let's have Eric Trump get a new golf course someplace in, I don't know, Bali. That kind of stuff could be going on. And if they're not public about it, we literally could have the triple whammy. And that
no, I fully expect all of that, all of it. But we'll see where this takes us, because in the coming days, they say there's going to be some great deals. So we'll have more to talk about and more to wade through. But Lori, I appreciate the work you guys do over there at Rethink Trade. Oh, folks will take a look at the website, rethinktrade.org. Appreciate the time as always, and can't wait to have you back.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Lori Wallach. Want to hear your thoughts. I know, got a lot of emails from people saying you're being too nice to Trump. I don't think so. I think that the blind squirrel has found the nut. It's just whether he's going to, we'll figure it out. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Keep it up. Rick at the ricksmithshow.com. Right back.